Today's Bible reading is taken from the book of Ruth, chapter 2. It's a story about what happens when a lady by the name of Ruth meets a man by the name of Boaz. As with all stories, there's some history that we need to understand before we think about Ruth and Boaz. And so I introduce to you another family. There is a lady whose name is Naomi, who married a man called Elimelech, and they had 2 sons. They lived in Bethlehem, where Jesus will be born, Bethlehem known as the house of bread. And they did this at a time when there was lots of food and everything was going really well. Unfortunately, there came a time when there was no harvest and everything became much harder. And so it was that Naomi and Elimelech and their 2 children journeyed from Bethlehem, the house of bread, where there was no bread, to a new land, to a land known as Moab. And there they lived quite happily again. And their children grew up. And they had wives too from Moab. And one of them, of the wives, was named Ruth. And all was going well. And then, unfortunately, and this is a really sad part of the story, Elimelech died. And then the 2 sons also died. And this left just Ruth and her 2 daughters-in-law. Naomi really wanted to go back home, and so she started to do so. And her 2 daughter-in-laws wanted to follow her. And Naomi said, no, you must return to your homelands. And so one of them did. But Ruth, she clung to Naomi. She held her so tightly that in the end, Naomi said, yes, that's fine. You can follow me back home. And so they did. Naomi was very sad still, as she remembered her husband and her sons and the land that she'd left. She wondered where God was and what had happened to them all. But Ruth, whose name means friend, stayed with Naomi, and eventually they returned to Bethlehem. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favour. And Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out and entered the field and began to glean with the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field that belonged to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Then just Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and said to his workers, "Who does that young woman belong to?" And the overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters.' She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter." So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay with the women who work with me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and wherever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." At this she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" And Boaz replied, "I've been told all about you, what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have standing of one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, have some bread, and dip it in the wine vinegar." When she sat down, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. And as she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men, "Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull up some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her." And so Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley and she gathered it, and it amounted to an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added, "That man is a close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He said even to me, 'Stay with my workers until they have finished harvesting my grain.'" And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed." So Ruth stayed with her mother-in-law and stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the harvest of barley and wheat were finished. And then she lived with her mother-in-law.